Hi guys and gals, friends of the Buffalo Naval Park. For today's video, this is a topic that I've been batting around in my head for a while now, and it is challenges in museum ship management. One of the many positives of being in the museum ship world is that there are like-minded people who also work at museum ships elsewhere. And so this topic has been discussed when we're at the HINSA Symposium, or when I go, like to the Kid, to visit other museum ships, or their staff comes to visit here. And so these are ideas that we've talked about. This isn't a fully exhaustive list, but it's a start. And my goal is to kind of show you the inner workings of what it's like working in a museum ship and in the museum ship community. Right off the bat, I've got these two stars up here. We have extremely important artifacts, but little funding. Right off the bat, let's just say that. And for us specifically, we are a 3-vessel museum. Let's just say that right off the bat. So within that, though, let's talk about, or let me describe to you, with one ship, the groups that are associated with even just having one vessel. And so I've got a little box there, and I've got a little of the outside community that touches the museum ship world. Of course, on the top I have the public. I also have associations, old salt associations. And for a 3-vessel museum like ours, it's not just for the ships that are here, it's also for their sister ships. And especially with the USS Little Rock, right? We have a lot of relations with the USS Providence and the Springfield and the Oklahoma City. So not only are there passionate sailors that served aboard our vessel, the USS Little Rock, we also have associations of Little Rock's sister ship that also come here because their vessels are not around. Also coming next is volunteers, docents, staff, veteran groups, sponsors, of course, ultimately quite important, corporate sponsors or sponsorships that we get through grants, things like that. The larger Navy community, donors, and whether that be contributors like yourself or donors of artifacts. And then on the bottom here, I put these two. That's potentially not specific to us, but for this conversation it is. Sea Cadets and Ham Radio Group. So those are other associations that come on board to use the vessel. And so when we look at it, there's potentially 11 different groups and organizations out in the world that touch the museum ship and the museum ships here. That could get pretty cluttered. So ultimately, as I have here, are we doing what is best for the ships themselves? All right, so with all of this activity going on, that is almost a daily question that I ask myself. Sure, we have docents that want to do something on board. We have the ham radio guys that want to do something on board. Guys and gals, excuse me. We have the Sea Cadets that want to do things on board. The larger Navy community, veteran groups, ship associations. But are we doing what's best for the ships themselves? And that is something that is hard to answer sometimes. It's, do we let something go that we wouldn't normally go to build a relationship? Do we just have to put our foot down sometimes and say, listen, you just can't do this particular thing? But then also always offer options. And so what This is what you can do aboard. So some of the areas that I'd like to highlight are these 5 things down here. So interpretation. 3-vessel museum. How are we going to interpret all of this stuff, right? So it's interpreting for the whole vessel, and that's 1962 for the Sullivans, 1959 for the Croaker, 1975 for Little Rock. What can we make available to the public in a way that satisfies individuals' interest, but is also safe for the public, is something that we can actually manage to do. What of the 1001 Sea stories do we actually tell? Right? We have the 75th Secretary of the Navy, SecNav Ray Mabus. He comes to visit because USS Little Rock was his vessel for 2 years, from 1970 to 1972. He has great stories. But they don't supplant any of the enlisted crew's stories. So they have to be woven together, and that takes a lot of time. Sometimes you have to say, is that a true story, or are they embellishing, or is it just completely fabricated? So sometimes you have to go out and try and do like a little investigation. Equipment. What is original on the ship? What has been modified? So what that might mean is that there's a piece of equipment that's been broken, or half of it's missing, and you are now modifying it with modern day materials to make it look like it did when the ship was in service. So trying to find that out. Provenance. When Ryan Zemansky and the New Jersey crew visited, they were really happy to hear the story of our gun plot spaces, and that I actually knew, because of records in the collection, where our Mark 48 Dead Reckoning computer went, things like that. And he said most museum ships don't have a record of where things go when they're stripped off. So, do we have provenance? Has something been taken? Has something been added? Where is it from? And that's a big thing when you go on a strip trip, right? To document what you're bringing here, and then to document where it actually came from. Tim and I, when I was down at the Kid, talked about something really interesting with their props. Now, I will choose to let him tell that story, but that was a really nice piece of equipment with the props and where it actually came from. Right? Does it actually belong here? You know, we get oodles and oodles of equipment. I get calls for equipment all the time. I don't have an example right now, but it could be like a sextant. Right, I know we had sextants on board, but maybe it's an antique sextant. Like, is this the place for it, or should it go down to a ship of the, like a sailing ship of that era? I have 75,000 here as a note to myself. When the USS Little Rock was in service, they carried 75,000 different parts aboard the ship. Forget auxiliaries or supply vessels when they're doing unreps or vertical replenishment. That's just the amount of pieces for the equipment that they stored aboard here. So now you're getting into the real numbers of just the amount of disparate artifacts and equipment that are on board. And moving to artifacts, this would be things that where I interface with, I interface with all of these, but very closely with things people donate. All right, so who donated it? Right, as I've screamed from the mountaintops, they did not have a curator here for 21 years. That meant there were people keeping it stowed here So someone donates something, they take it, we'll keep it, let's put it in a box and put it in this space. Right? But not much work had been done since, I would say, 1999. There was a curator that was here for about a year and a half, and she was able to work through some of the collections, but that's work is well done, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to what we actually have. What is our collection policy? Do we even need to accept it? Right, so our collection policy prior to me coming here was accept everything that people give. Now it's anyone from Buffalo or Western New York that served in the various military branches, or people that served aboard our vessels. Does it fit the museum mission? That's pretty straightforward, and those are questions that I have to always ask myself in my head. Does it fit our mission? Preservation. Now this is just straight preservation, say using the Department of Interior standards for historic vessels, maritime vessels. Right? This is, does any space need stabilization? Does it need preservation work? Right? And they all have different definitions. Does it need to be rehabbed? So what are the current needs of all of our vessels? Are we finding wasted metal, wasted water? And then how to address those? Areas of distress. What are the areas of distress? So taking surveys, putting your eyes on different areas, not even related to the parts that are for the museum, whether it's a space like the Admiral's quarters that someone can see. I'm talking well down below or well up high. Areas that won't be seen, but they're needed to keep the ships floating. All right, I really kind of focused on this, obviously, after the Sullivan's partial sinking, and developing a 5-year plan to say, let's tackle especially the Little Rock, right, 610 feet long. Let's tackle year by year certain sections to make sure that we are preserving the ship so we don't have a water incursion or an emergency event like we did with the Sullivans. And managing expectations. This goes across all of these individuals that touch a museum ship. Can we imagine if we are working with 400 different people here and we are just saying, go for it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. Right? So we have to manage expectations. And I'm managing people's expectations all the time. Sometimes makes me out to be a bad guy, but that's what we need to do. So how to keep individuals focused, whether that is the ship association or volunteers or the docents or my coworkers and colleagues or the larger Navy community or veteran groups. How do we keep them focused on what all of us are trying to accomplish? Passion versus practical. A lot of people bring a lot of passion to the museum ship world. But how do we tap in, how do we focus them? And how do we focus that passion into a practical causeway that can be followed? Also getting them to tap into their own networks. Right? They might not have an expertise in something, but they know someone who does. So how to bring their own networks and manage those individuals' expectations while benefiting from their knowledge. So you can see there's a lot to do there's a lot of challenges to the museum ship management world. And I tell you, this has been something that's been so startling and interesting to me, is that, I've worked in a prior museum prior to here. I had a small business, a small collections business, where people couldn't hire me full time, but they could hire me for a finite project. And so I had a lot of contracts and a lot of companies and museums and small businesses that I worked with. But this, especially right here, blew me out of the water when I started working here. I could not believe how many groups wanted to be here, had a passion to be here, and it all just kind of like smacked me in the face all at once. So I've really tapped into my own managing of expectations. I do it on the phone, I do it in person, I do it via email. Right? Because we want the work that can benefit the Naval Park, but we also want the individuals to feel empowered and impassioned too. Again, whatever it is up here. Well, please leave your questions and comments down below. This is probably not done yet, right? So ultimately, so much passion here. And in the larger museum ship community, all of the folks that work at other museum ships know what I'm meaning. But how to tap into it right, that's the thing, and that's the challenge. Right, is how to tap into it correctly and to keep everything from to keep everything on the straight and narrow and that causeway, to keep it moving in the direction that you want it to go in. We appreciate it. Again, as I mentioned in the prior whiteboard video, please give a thumbs up. It seems though only about 1 out of every 10 views gets a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And leave comments. I usually answer every one. And thanks so much, as always, for your continued support. If you like this, I could do a second one. If you have your own little challenge, of course, please let me know. Thanks, everyone.